Chicago always had kings. Some wore crowns you could see, some wore crowns the streets whispered about. Crowns made from fear, loyalty, and blood spilled on the pavement. On the south side, a young David Barksdale was building an empire. No king survived the trenches without a right hand that'll go to hell and back for him. And for King David, that right hand was a ghost the city ain't never forgot. A man whose name rolled through the alleys like thunder. Roy Kilroy Dawson, co-founder of the Devil's Disciples, an enforcer, the man who carried out the will of a legend. This a warning, a walk through the darkest corners of Chicago history, a trip into the life of a man who lived in the shadows and died trying to take what wasn't his. Southside Chicago, mid-1960s, before the music, before the internet, before the names BD and GD echoed through the culture, there was only survival. And Roy Dawson, he was built for it. A shorty race between broken streetlights and broken promises. He came up in the era of fists turning into firepower, where whole neighborhoods was getting swallowed by poverty, police pressure, and young black men with nothing but adrenaline and anger in their chest. But Roy ain't just another kid in the streets. He had presence, he had nerve, and like so many leaders Chicago ever produced, he had violence in his spirit, sitting quiet, waiting to be shaped. That shape came when he crossed paths with another Southside shorty, David Barksdale. The two clicked instantly. David was strategy, Roy was force. David was the mind, Roy was the muscle. Some people lead with their mouth, Roy led with his hands, and the streets were memorable. Before the world knew the word gangster disciples, before the unification attempts, before Larry Hoover rose into the picture, there were the Devil's Disciples, a raw, unfiltered street nation growing out the Southside's frustration. Kilroy was one of the original architects. He helped King David lay the bricks, establishing sets, enforcing rules, and spreading their disciple identity long before the city had language for it. But what made him irreplaceable was his loyalty to David Barksdale. When the king moved, Kilroy followed. When the king nodded, Kilroy acted. When the king had an enemy, Kilroy handled it personally. Their bond wasn't just brotherhood, it was blueprint. And when King David wanted expansion, Kilroy became the mission. In an era where gangs stayed close to their blocks, Kilroy did the unthinkable. He carried the disciple identity from the south side to the west side, establishing the first recognized disciple presence out there. Our west wasn't sweet. It wasn't open arms. It was a battlefield with different rules, different hustles, different names ringing bells. But Kilroy moved like a storm. He wasn't trying to fit in. He was planting the flag. He built alliances. He enforced discipline. He created pockets of disciple structure where there was none. Chicago historians still talk about this like folklore. A Southside enforcer walking into the West Side and making it bend. That move alone put Kilroy in the books. But the next chapter stained him in blood. According to Tony Sawal's reporting in the article, one bystander killed, two hurt in the shooting. Roy Kilroy Dawson was accused of a deadly attack where a man named Jack Sibley lost his life. The papers wrote it clean, but the reality was chaos. Gunfire erupting in broad daylight, a bystander dead, two others wounded, a community frozen, fear swallowing a block whole. The police blamed Kilroy. The streets believed he did it, and Kilroy never publicly denied it. This wasn't the moment he stopped being the right hand. This was the moment he became the enforcer. This is when his legend took shape in violence, in whispers, and the type of energy that makes even killers look over their shoulder. An innocent bystander was killed and two others were wounded early yesterday in a shooting involving the Blackstone Rangers and the Disciples, rival Southside street gangs. A ranger was wounded slightly in the fray. The shooting took place in the Cameron Club, a tavern and dance hall at 7757 Greenwood Avenue. Ticket taker killed. Killed was Jack Sibley, 57, of 724 East 134th Street, a janitor for the Board of Education and a part-time ticket taker in the club's dance hall. Sibley died last night, several hours after he had been taken to Jackson Park Hospital with a bullet in his brain. He never regained consciousness, doctors said. Gang Intelligence Unit detectives said last night they arrested Roy Dawson, also known as Roy Kilroy, 21 of 436 West 63rd Street, in connection with the slaying of Sibley. He will appear in felony court today on a charge of murder accountability, police said. Victor Connor, 60 of 118th East 44th Street, a security guard at the club was struck once in the elbow and again in the right forearm. He was able to drive himself to Jackson Park Hospital and is in good condition. Roy wasn't just a shooter. He was the message. He was the warning. He was the reason the Devil's Disciples had a reputation that even the police quietly respected. People said he walked with a calm so cold, it made the air change. Said he never raised his voice, just raised his hands, or raised his gun. In a time before social media, men like Kilroy were urban myths, walking on two legs. Nobody had pictures, nobody had footage, but everybody had a story, and every story led back to the same truth. He was King David's #1 enforcer. The blade the king kept hitting until it was time to cut. But even blades get dull, and even enforcers get tempted, and the temptation will end his life. As time moved forward, the city changed. Drugs flooded Chicago heavier, money flowed deeper, the hustlers grew wealthier, and greed grew louder. Kilroy, a man who once enforced the code, crossed the line. According to old street whispers, he attempted to rob one of the biggest drug dealers out west, a man whose pockets were long, whose shooters were loyal, and whose retaliation was guaranteed. This wasn't a petty lick. This wasn't a desperate grab. This was a man addicted to danger, testing death like it was a rival he couldn't ignore. But that robbery, it sealed his fate. Kilroy was caught lacking, and the West Side made sure he didn't walk away. He was killed brutally. A final message that even legends bleed. The same streets he once dominated took him back as a memory. Roy Kilroy Dawson died without murals, without candlelights, without a social media flood of RIP posts. His life existed before cameras. His deeds lived only in the mouths of those who feared him, followed him, or survived him. But his impact is built into Chicago gang history. He helped King David create an army. He planted disciples out west. He influenced the structure that would one day become BD-GD politics, to echo into generations. But his story also shows the truth behind the glamour. When you build your life on violence, violence builds itself inside you, and one day, it comes for its payment. Kilroy lived hard, died harder, and yet his shadow still lingers when old heads talk about the early days. And I think that what we can learn from the death of Kilroy is this. Chicago raises kings, but the crown always weighs more than the throne. Kilroy's life teaches us that power gained through fear isn't really power. It's a countdown. He helped build a nation, but never got to watch it grow. He enforced discipline, but couldn't discipline the demons in his own heart. He protected the king, but couldn't protect himself. In these wicked streets of Chicago, the line between legend and the cautionary tale is only as wide as a trigger pull. Kilroy lived fast, left scars on the city, and died chasing a bag he didn't even need. So what did we learn? That strength without wisdom turns into destruction. That loyalty without boundaries turns into blindness. That the streets don't love nobody, not even the ones who built them. And when your legacy is written in bullets, your ending writes itself. Rest in peace to Kilroy, a soldier, an enforcer, a warning carved into Chicago history. This has been another SCN TV production. It's your boy, SCN TV.